Before we actually cast on, let's talk about some suitable yarns. I think this one would be just adorable. It's a Mary Maxim worsted weight yarn that works great. However, I'm going to take pity on you and not use it. I'm going to use this, which is even nicer and a little bit more expensive. I really think the rag would be an adorable sweater, but I think you're going to have an easier time seeing what I'm doing with a smooth yarn. Now, this is not an ad for the yarn. However, they're not kidding. This is extremely durable about maintaining its fresh look. So I do recommend it. We're going to begin by knotting a little bit of a loop into the yarn. I'm working here on the small gauge loom with 3 washers. That gets the gauge for me. You do not have to use the identical setup. The regular gauge with no washers, or if you're a tight knitter with 1 washer, will work fine for you probably. And on the small gauge, you may prefer 2 or 4 washers. Each of us knits to a unique hand. So although my way is a good starting place for you, it may not be what you eventually end up with. Now, let's start out. This is going to be the first stitch I cast on. I'm going to show you a little trick to kind of hide the knot without having to untie it. So I am going to actually hang my loop on the peg around the corner. Now we're going to do the double E-wrap cast on, in which we go behind the nearest pin, not peg, pin. Wrap the next peg twice. Lift the lower loop that we made over the upper, pull snug. Around the next pin, wrap twice without involving any pins. Lower over upper, pull snug. That pulling snug step is what keeps it neat. So while you don't want to haul away like you were raising a sail, you do want to be firm in your grip. Now, while I continue to do this and let you watch, I'm going to tell you why I chose this cast on. It's a good looking cast on, and it has a nice amount of stretch, and it's easy to do. Is it my favorite cast on? And the answer is no, it is not. I think that both the crocheted cast on and the long-tail cast on are superior in looks. However, we need to keep in mind that this sweater is going to need to pull over somebody's head and torso. It is possible to make those other 2 cast-ons stretchy enough to look good and still stretch that much. However, it takes some experience, and since this video is aimed at people who may not have knitted a sweater before, and none of us will find out how well the cast-on stretches over the body until the sweater is completed, I'm going to advise you to stay with the double E-wrap for your first sweater. Unless, of course, you're already a master, and then you can do as you like, and you'll know how to make it work. So we're going to go all the way around like this. I'll continue around the corner, and I will meet you when I'm back over here. I'm around. This is the last stitch that I have cast on, and this is the stitch holding the knotted loop. To make a smooth, continuous edge, I'm going to go ahead and cast this stitch on, even though it's not strictly necessary. Now I have 2 loops to lift over. One is a wrap that I just made. One is the original loop. This will make this cast-on stitch the same size as all the others, and in the event that my loop wasn't identical, that fact will be hidden. There are other ways to get this smooth and even, but this one is easy and doesn't require you to unknot the original loop and be very fussy. And I like to leave it knotted there if I may, because on children's clothes, the sturdier the better, is my viewpoint. So this little trick will allow us to weave in our initial tail, which is down here somewhere. and the holes start be pretty invisible. So consider this peg number 1 in the pattern. This is the final peg in every round. By the way, it does not matter whether you decide to work clockwise or counterclockwise, and you can even change directions at this point. I have a quirky peculiarity. I like to cast on moving counterclockwise, but sometimes to knit clockwise. So I think everything's all evened up. I'm just going to change direction. Before we go farther, a word about my loom tool. People sometimes admire it and wish they had one. It's not an expensive thing to do. You can make one yourself, and I have a whole video on that called A Do-It-Yourself Loom Tool from a Pen and a Nail. It's indexed on my video index on my website, and I just did a YouTube search myself to see if that would come up if I just put in what I said, do-it-yourself loom hook from Pen and Nail, and it sure did. So you can have one if you want one. Now let us begin. I'm going to make knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, and as I do it, I will explain why. First, let's just do it for a minute and talk about it. There were my 2 knit stitches. Now I'm going to purl 2. When you purl, there is a tendency for the stitch to be a little bit bigger than the knit, but it need not be. Right there, that's when you control the size of the stitch. Purl, snug it up. Knit, knit. Now if you're really skilled at the continuous U-wrap with purls, it can be done, but I'm going to demo like this. Purl 1, purl 2. Here's an interesting thing. Somebody told me this a while ago, and I thought she was crazy, but I checked it out, and she's not. I was wrong. I did not see personally why one kind of ribbing would pull tighter than another in reference to knit 1, purl 1 versus knit 2, purl 2. Same amount of knits and purls in each case, and it's the alternating that makes the pulling in occur. So I couldn't see why, when she said, oh, K2P2 pulls in much more. And I thought, sounds kooky. But I tried it, and she's right. And I have been pondering that fact, and I've decided it's the geometry and spacing of the stitches. It might not actually be true in every single gauge. I think I'm ready for purl 2s. Talking, I forgot. Knit, purl, knit, purl, knit, purl, knit. I'm ready for purls, right? So the reason that is an important and interesting fact to us in this project is a lot of times people make the ribbing tighter than the main body so that it will pull in snugly at hems and cuffs. Sometimes that's a style feature you don't really want, but many people do like it. On a loom, that's a little bit trickier than my hand because you need to change your loom setting. I could begin with a different amount of washers, take the fabric off, add washers for the body, but that's somewhat laborious. I could work top down and then either make decreases so there were fewer fewer ribbing stitches, or rehang the almost finished sweater on the loom, having adjusted the loom with fewer washers. And I detail all of this in the Kiss Your Kids pattern. However, I'm not going to do it. I don't think it's important enough. This is a sweater designed for beginners, and you can usually get a perfectly nice bottom hem, some people call it welt, just by doing what we're doing. And that is why I thought the knit 2, purl 2 ribbing might be a good option. If we knit it neatly, pulling our stitches adequately snug, which is not super, super tight. I never believe in knitting super, super tight. Hard on the loom, hard on the yarn, hard on you. But reasonably snug, and we use 2x2 or knit 2, purl 2 ribbing, I think we will get a nice bottom hem. For little bitty sweaters like I'm making, 8 rows of ribbing is enough. No, I said 8. I didn't mean that. I meant 12. 8 for cuff. That'll be about 2 inches worth of ribbing. You certainly do not want less than 1 inch. It's permissible to adjust to your personal taste, but less than 1 inch sometimes will flip out and misbehave and just not do its job, where 2 inches to 4 inches normally does fine. For the bigger kids, I recommend going with more like 4 inches. For the little bitty ones, 2 inches, and then graduating in between. And suggested numbers are given in the Kiss Your Kids pattern based on what has tended to look nice, proportionate to the sweater, and do a good job in my experience of knitting. So we're all going to just keep doing our ribbing around. If you have decided to do knit one, purl one, we can still be friends. Finish yours and finish the amount of rows you've decided on, and we'll get together again when we're ready to go on to stockinette for the body of the sweater.